Hello everyone and welcome to the Isonzo Moschin Expansion Q&A stream. I'm Flakfire, I'll be your host for today. We're joined by Black Mill Games CEO and Isonzo's creative director, Jos Hoob, producer and game designer, Teja Stepanek, 3D artist and historical enthusiast, Jim Chilton, and map level designer, Claudia Scaletta. Welcome everybody, thanks for being here. So to start, the Moschin Expansion is live, so tell us what's in it.
Well, that is a great question. The new expansion has some new weapons, so the Beretta M1918 for the assault class, the Geballte Ladung for the assault and engineer classes, a new map of course, and the first night map for us, Moschin. And the release of the Avanti Savoia DLC with some cool new stuff.
All right, so the battle for Col Moschin in 1918. This is Isonzo's first night map. So tell us why this battle. What does it add to the Isonzo experience?
This map is, like you said, it's the first one that's during the night. And it was quite an important one to take because it's one of the final Austro-Hungarians offensive attacks they did. So it's probably what then took them on to collapse eventually later during the war. So it was quite an important one to, I think, take over and kind of wrap up Isonzo with. So this map also is during the summer. So it took place mid-June. I think it was the 15th of June. And they start the attack around 4 a.m., I think. So definitely dead of the night. It's kind of dawn, I guess, as it's summer, but still really dark. So I think that was quite a fun element to have for one of our maps. And yeah, I think it's quite a fun one.
One of the context here is also it's part of the second battle of the Piave. The final attack, Montello, the other map which we launched September of last year, August September of last year, was also part of this offensive. So it's we kind of changed the roadmap around a bit. Originally this map was going to be out earlier, but we decided to do Adamello first. The winter map in actually in the winter, which kind of makes sense. People are into snow, so we and during the Christmas season. So we decided to do one of the White War maps first, and then actually launch this one later. But this one originally was to be part of the final Austrian attack, the offensive, together with Montello. So it takes place around the same time as the other battle, and they're in the same offensive. So you play them also one after the other when you're in the game.
Now that we've got some context, what are some points of interest on the map? How do you design it?
So generally speaking, when we design a map, there's a lot of research happening at first. So we look at a lot of reference pictures, lots of, if we can find aerial maps of the area to get an idea, both of just the terrain in general, what it looked like at the time, compare it to what it looks like now. So lots of back and forth researching that, and just really gives us an idea if there is any important landmarks we want to get in there, or that really should be in there. As like I said, we want to make this as accurate as possible to real life. So yeah, lots of research involved, and then usually it's just a matter of deciding what would be also fun for the players to see and play around in it. So there's a bit of that as well. I guess the main focus for this particular map was trying to find some landmarks. The area is just a lot of forest. There's a lot of ridges and slopes, lots of gravel. So there wasn't a lot of specific landmarks we could find, but there was definitely a lot of maps we found with the layout of some of the trenches, some of the bunkers, which were the focus for the Austro-Hungarians, was to destroy them. So there was a lot of research on that area, and then create kind of a rough block out of that section of that terrain. And of course, the main goal was reaching the end where Col Moschin is, and where the peak of the mountain is. So have an idea where that distance would be. And there's a lot of work with proportions of the map and trying to fit everything in a map that would be fun for the players to, walk through instead of hiking miles and miles. So trying to figure that out and squeeze everything in one level.
I realize it's a bit of a loaded question, but how do you strike the balance between historical accuracy and fun?
Like I said, there's a lot of research, but also just a lot of testing, and just trying to figure out that balance, like you said.
Yeah, I think one of the components that always returns is real life is kind of boring. Like a lot of locations are very open and there's nothing there. Like if you look at Col Moschin, the area around it, okay, there's forest there, but there's also sort of barren, open grass fields that, in real life are a few kilometers because you need to graze the cows there. That doesn't make for very much interesting gameplay. So there's always a matter of how can we, add a lot of cover in the area there that, and actually don't get you killed from miles away. And then that's a balance between making it look like it's real, like Claudia said, the proportions matter. It's getting the proportions right so that it feels like you're there. Whereas in the game, the area is much more compressed than in real life. Playing with a smaller area means that at the same time as you compress stuff, you must still have the feeling that the mountain is as high as in real life, sort of that you feel like, oh, this thing is actually 100, 200 meters, or in some cases in other maps are much, much higher. That's really tricky. So yeah, again, reiterate what Claudia said. It's playing with that, with the proportions and sort of the barren natural and cultural landscapes that are in real life, no, without losing that.
There's a lot of trial and error, trying to figure out what works, but also just testing if it's playable. So like they can't walk around for kilometers on end. It would be pretty boring.
The trenches look a bit different on Moschin, but still somehow familiar. So how did you design those?
Yes, there is definitely research involved. One main thing is to consider where this map is placed. So Col Moschin is actually really near, not next to each other, to Monte Grappa. So if you see a lot of those trenches are actually fairly similar. I've took some inspiration from that map. And there was also, again, research involved. I looked at a lot of references of the area and what those trenches looked like. And definitely heavily based it on those images. And the terrain is such a big part of it. So when they build those trenches, of course, they have certain materials there that can use. So it's very rocky, which is mostly what they use. There's a lot of gravel. And as you can see, they just incorporated it into the terrain and made it also look as part of it. A lot of the time it was difficult in those black and white blurry pictures to figure out exactly where the trenches go. Sometimes they blend in very well.
That's a great answer. So the next question I have might be a burning one for the community, pun intended. Moschin has a ton of fire on it. Why?
I guess from my perspective, there was, again, in the research, there was so many images of completely burnt forest, completely destroyed, those lots of burnt trees, and it was a big part of it. So this might be also a question for our historians, but from my understanding, they use a lot of flamethrowers, and also being summer, there was lots of dry leaves, so it just happened to be an element that we couldn't pass on. And on the other hand, it's also because it was a night map, having that element of fire was, from my side, really good because it gave me a light source. So it made some of the issues that came with being a night map more easy to fix for me.
On that topic, and you mentioned lighting, are there any other challenges you ran into during the development of Moschin?
Yeah, so the visibility is definitely one of the things we needed to test the most, and needed some reiterations. So when we first made the map, we tried to make it accurate. So of course, nighttime, 4 a.m. was really dark. So when we first started testing it, there was just a lot of issues with the attackers not being able to see who was killing them, where they were coming from, and for the defenders also to see where the attackers were coming from. There was just a lot of those issues. So there was lots of testing, lots of trial and error, trying to get back to what would work. And we went a bit overboard, made it too bright, and so on. So there was definitely it was definitely one of the main issues for this map, was to find the right balance for that lighting.
The next question is specifically for Jos. Why no Arditi counterattack on the Moschin map? They played a huge role here.
Well, first of all, the defenders, the assault troops of the defenders do get to counterattack once they're, the actual Moschin headquarters falls. So in that sense, it is there. It is ultimately part of an, as I said, the Austro-Hungarian solstice offensive. So it's they attack on the Piave, on the Grappa Massif, both Monte Grappa and here. It's their offensive, so they have the initiative. We had to make a choice who gets to attack, and they, if they part of our offensive system is that there's only one attacker. That said, the counterattack, the Col Moschin counterattack, is ultimately what also gives the name to the regiment that's still around today in the Italian army. It's literally named Col Moschin. So if you Google it, that's probably one of the first things you'll pop up when you look for it. It's still carried today. It's one of their proudest moments where the Arditi counterattack actually managed to sort of re-seize the initiative.
All right, so we talked about the map in detail. Now tell me about the weapons in the Moschin expansion. You're adding the Geballte Ladung 6X and the Beretta M1918. That last one there, what is that like in real life?
The design of the Beretta was sort of taken with parts of the existing sort of Italian production line that they had. So when you use it in game, you'll notice that it's got a similar rifle stock to the Carcano version with the folding bayonet. So we've got that, but it's kind of based on a sort of Villa Perosa light system. Same sort of magazine setup as well. So magazine on the top, and we've got the bullets trapped as you slowly go through this. We have made this semi-automatic. It took us a little while to actually work out that it was semi-automatic. There's a lot of threads and discussions online with regards to other games that have included this submachine gun as they list it. But ours will be a sort of semi-automatic, sort of carbine-esque type weapon. I think using the 9mm Glicenti, but I've just spurted that out, so it may not be the 9mm Glicenti. But yeah, it's a super cool weapon, particularly given its role versus the Villa Perosa, which was putting as many bullets downrange as possible, versus this, which is a lot more compact, a lot more manageable. You can handle it, ideal for trench fighting.
Isonzo always draws a delicate balance on this, but how many of these saw frontline use?
This falls into the category of it being a really iconic weapon, but the usage not being, not kind of meeting the actual legendary status of the weapon, let's say. It's something that's important enough for us to include. We do have other weapons in there that are equally as rare. Certainly some of the rear-line rifles, the single-shot Fratellis and things like that. So I think they made about 3,000 to 4,000 of them. It's going to be something that's just available to the assault class. So a rare enough piece, but certainly one of these items that's that's iconic enough for us to include. And we could have added another single shot, but yeah, we'll go with something a little bit more fun, a little bit more adventurous.
The Beretta M1918 was sort of game-changing in real life, so how do you balance its magazine size and rapid-fire capability in Isonzo?
Yes, pretty much a lot of testing, and it's true, it's really hard because a lot of the weapons are similar, and then the ones that are not similar are not so vastly different and really hard to fit in. But indeed, we do a lot with our testers. We check everything. We do a lot of internal testing, and then we can see how to adjust these values to kind of still have them in a somewhat a realistic kind of set of numbers, but still have them fit in. So we play with a lot of things like fire time, distance, lethal distance. Try to fine tune every little centimeter sometimes, so a weapon actually has a sort of a different feeling. But I would say also what helps here is animation and the kind of usage of different sights. So some weapons, even when they're very similar, feel different, which really helps in balancing.
I think there's also a bit of a trade-off there. It's got the vertically mounted magazine. You know, it's top fed, so you've got to contend with that in your field of view.
And it's a really awful set of iron sights as well. Like the whole gun's at a jaunty angle.
Yeah, it's not the most user-friendly weapon. Even if it was full auto, it would have been firing so quickly that that would have been of limited use. I'd say people would feel, perhaps in the trenches, it would feel quite powerful because you get the spray. Just by its practical range, the fact that the sight's blocked, so it kind of balances itself out already.
It falls quite neatly into the category of weapons that we've added where we know that we have to include something that doesn't really have a sort of comparative item, within another faction. Thinking that, the MG08/15, it's a really good example of, okay, we kind of have to add this and find ways then to balance it. So, for example, if you're firing and walking, you're going to be a lot slower, etc. It's a far longer reload. There's plenty of ways that we can mitigate, how we balance these things. But yeah, it's. I think to echo what Taya said, it's always nice to add something that isn't another rifle. We have plenty of rifles, which some of them are really enjoyable to work on, and I think like with the sort of repurposed Chilean Mausers that were issued as the M14 for the Austrians. There's some really cool things we can add there, like crests and markings and things like that. But it's a rifle, so it can be a little bit frustrating on the design front.
Yeah, I would say though, despite word of bad sights and blocked vision, Beretta is already up there with one of my favorite weapons.
You also sort of balance the weapon by putting it in the assault class, correct?
Yeah, I think this is also, Jim might say more, but because of who used it and how, so it's not really something that can be widespread among the classes.
We also have limited numbers, like our limits on classes, but also limits on individual weapons to not make sure that everybody runs around with snipers or machine guns. And it's also in the unlock system, so you have to progress a bit in order to be able to use it. So it's behind some gates to make sure that not every other person walks around with it. It would be not really more representative of a battle. They were very rare, extremely like up there handful saw combat usage. If you want to quantify it a bit, historians, if you look at different channels, they debate how many actually made it into the front line. We know some made it in very, very late stage, according to some literature. But so you have to be somewhat respectful with the numbers to still make sure that if you're playing Isonzo, that it feels like most people still run around with trusty bolt action rifles, and that's sort of the main weaponry that's used.
When it was on the battlefield, who was using the Beretta M1918?
I mean, the reference imagery that we've got, it's there's a lot of imagery of like illustrations, particularly with the Arditi. It is going to be given, I imagine, the sort of same treatment as which the MP18 was with the German army, in that they were going to give it to the stormtroopers, the assault troops. I think we did the just as a quick side note, I think we did the MP18 justice with Verdun as well, and again making that a sort of rarer weapon, but a big enough an impact weapon to kind of make its presence justified on this front. Yeah, the Arditi or any class that's designed for assault is how we've applied this. I know with other weapons, similar weapons that we've added, particularly like the artillery Luger, we've branched that alongside the engineer class, I think, as well, Taya. But that historically is a much more, founded in fact sort of thing, that the artillery Luger was, issued to artillerymen and people who don't necessarily need a full length or even carbine length rifle.
Let's talk about the next weapon added in the expansion, the Geballte Ladung 6X. How was that developed, and what is its purpose?
So with regards to the Geballte Ladung, you've got the German grenades. I think it's sort of a concussive or a grenade, more high explosive than actually throwing shrapnel and things like that out there. So they're used as almost as a device to stun rather than kill. As trench warfare progressed, particularly on the Western Front, you're finding that more complicated fortifications are being made, and the Germans just found that one of the easier ways to clear one of these fortifications would be to, instead of throwing loads of grenades down, bundle a load together and then put it together. Then just one person is in command of the effort of trying to take out a target. This is something that worked well enough to reappear in the Second World War. There's lots of references, certainly in the Second World War, of hand grenades bundled together, Eastern Front in particular. But again, for the same reason, it's clearing fortifications. It's I think it translates roughly as something like bundle charge or concentrated charge or something like that. It's just the idea of a makeshift satchel charge, I guess, before the kind of properly official adoption of satchel charges as we might know them.
There are a ton of different grenades in Isonzo, so where does the Geballte Ladung fit into the meta?
The use case that I imagine it fulfills is you're looking to basically take out more people with a single grenade. It's definitely a sort of, as we're intending it, a sort of a weapon of clearing. Again, some parity there with the Beretta 1918. I haven't actually used it, which is shameful. But I believe the idea is that you can't throw it as far, but it'll do a hell of a lot more damage.
Yeah, for sure. You can't throw it as far as the others, but the impact of it is greater, I think, to any of the other grenades we have currently in the game.
Those weapons aside, and this next question comes to us direct from the Isonzo Discord community, how do you pick which weapons are added in expansions?
Overall, we, of course, want to include the most common weapons first. So the weapons that are directly in the front line, standard issue, that's a no-brainer. Those are typically what we ship with those pretty much. And then it's a matter of a trade-off between rarity, different gameplay elements, like do they bring something to the game that's different from other weapons? How rare are they? And then there's a trade-off between going back in time, which for us is we always bias going back in time because it's the war catalog of weapons that are in racks from 30 years ago, 40 years ago are being brought back into the front. You can see how that works in Ukraine now. It's like desperate from any kind of weaponry. They're going back, they're fielding T-55s now. Like it goes all the way back. Imagine you're Austria, Hungary, or the Italian Empire. You have to use weapons from 50 years prior to that. You're talking 80s, 70s, 80, but even before that, these old flintlock flintlock rifles. So we bias towards that. But yeah, sometimes it's some of that's fielded slightly newer, more experimental, cutting edge weapons. In case of the Beretta. And then there's a category of weapons that were around, that were not necessarily super experimental, but just rare in general, like the Geballte Ladung is not maybe a field modification more than a standard issue. It's not like as far as I know, not a giant factory which pumps out Geballte Ladungs. That's more of a field modification. Again, seeing what you or what you see on the news every day in Ukraine, drones with duct tape and things. Same thing here. We need something, we tape it together, and it becomes a thing. So that it's a rarity, but it's fairly common. So, and then there's a trade-off. Yeah, what we can include, and it's also on top of that layered faction balance and class balance. So. We can stack the whole German assault class with all their experimental weapons they fielded from all the fronts, which is nice, but we would come off with quite an imbalanced game. And the Germans are not really the main actors in this game either. So we just try to distribute that somewhat fairly. Yeah, and then it's how do we divide it between the different updates as well. In each update, we just have some kind of not that we do 5 types of grenades. That gets a bit uninteresting for one update. So we try to spread that around so we can give the proper weapon the proper attention as well in the when we do an update. We do want to give proper historical attention to a weapon. The rarity is also controlled. Like the further we go into the roadmap, the more appropriate it is to include weapons that were used as well on the map that they're deployed on. So now we're getting to the end of the war. We come through the whole story of the Italian front. We started off in 1950. Now we're in mid to late 1918. It also makes sense that we introduce weapons that were actually deployed then.
So we talked about the weapons and the map, but there are some other changes coming with this update. A big upgrade to the Avanti Savoia cosmetic DLC. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, basically every player that owns the Avanti DLC currently will now get some extra additions to it, some new stuff all around, and also the DLC is now available for others as well, which previously we got a lot of questions about.
Yeah, it's come to the sort of same sort of scale as the other packs that we've released. So series of uniforms for each faction, for each class. This one's been really cool to work on because we've been able to kind of with it being more focused on the late war side of things. We can look at things like camouflage helmets. Some more of the unusual items of gear as well. So there's some really famous images floating about of Arditi with Adrian helmets with ear protection, visors, and things like that. Things that we know are quite rare and quite experimental, but they are cool enough to warrant some attention. And yeah, there's a series of headgear that's also whether or not it's camouflage or not, still applicable to the various classes. So we've got things like the correct engineer or Arditi badges on the Italian caps. Similarly, I think probably my favorite item is the Toscana Regiment Adrian helmet, which is based on an Adrian helmet made by the French for the Russians. But as the Russians left the war, these were then issued to the Italians, and they've still got the original sort of Russian crest and coat of arms on them, with an Italian number and crown painted on them. So really cool really niche little historical nuggets that we've managed to touch on here. Some of them only, kind of museum pieces at this point as well. So uncommon, but they're definitely on the right side of cool. I mean, some of the stuff that we looked at throughout the whole process actually is, with the Italian army and other armies in particular, shortages of simple things like dyes for clothing was something that that kept on popping up. So some Italian uniforms are quite a rich or olive drab color for Alpinis, etc. But you have examples of different fabrics being used, or indeed just the fabric not being treated with the same amount of dye or any dye at all versus the other stuff. All just little historical quirks. It's all production line stuff basically, and we can give it a subtle nod, not just in the weapons but in the actual cosmetics itself. And yeah, the Avanti Savoia re-release, it'll have some stuff in there that people will look at and think, oh, particularly the experimental items, but they are experimental. They existed. They lend themselves really well to kind of the solstice and late 1918 fighting that we're looking. Sorry, late war 1918 fighting that we're exploring.
Jim, you mentioned a few things earlier, but how do you decide what to add in terms of uniforms and cosmetics for Isonzo?
So Isonzo was kind of a bit of a unique pass compared to the other two previous games. So with Tannenberg and Verdun, we kind of knew that what a section would look like and how they look at certain points throughout the war. So with Verdun and Tannenberg, we had this wonderful sort of system of, okay, we've got the French chasseurs alpins, and then we'd have like 1914, 1916, 1917 variants and stuff like that. Isonzo brought its own challenge in that obviously the idea of character creation was introduced in this game. Base production was identifying exactly what we need, base loadouts for the Italians, so what ammo pouches are they using, what backpacks, helmets, tunics, all of this sort of stuff. And then from there, particularly in the past few DLCs, branching out into the really sort of unique items, thinking particularly sort of around the high altitude stuff, the great big fluffy coats, where I had to figure out a way of not just making the coat but rendering like a fur collar or a fur cuff and things like that. So the process was identifying what was needed as a jumping off point, and then we could branch out into further things from there. I think this DLC lends itself to that as well. We still have a sort of base. Okay, yeah, everybody gets this certain kind of belt. Everybody gets these sorts of ammunition pouches because they're specific to this unit or to this role. But then we can go in and do some cool, like for example with the Alpini. Great big white woolly sort of turtleneck jumper underneath the tunic, and then a bugle placed on the chest, and just taking what probably is quite an impractical thing, but making it look cool, making it look fun, and just giving it a really unique look. Like looking back at all of the files and everything that we've been working with, and all of the production that's gone into it. There's I've several sort of 3D scenes on my machine that are just jam full with different versions of tunics, different versions of how the belt's worn, whether or not there's grenades tucked into the belts, flare guns, all of this sort of stuff. So it's the production's usually identifying what we need, and then just sky's almost the limit beyond that.
For reference materials on things like this, what do you use? Do you spend a lot of time digging through things like photographs or video references?
Yes, we work where we can with original sources in regards to photographs taken around the period. That's a really important one. Secondly, we've been to museums. I know there's certainly quite a few museums in the north of Italy that are wonderful for this. Sadly, I've not been to one of those, but we've certainly been to museums in France, etc., which also contain uniforms for the two sides. for the two main sides in Isonzo as well. So, for example, the museum that we went to in France, one of their references, or rather one of their sort of display pieces, we referenced for some of the high altitude stuff, the sort of use of gaiters and crampons, you know, the spikes on your mountaineer shoes and things like that. So where we can, we work from those references. The there's also a pretty active reenactment community online, which is very useful. We and they're quite intense a lot of the time as well, which is incredibly useful because if we get something wrong, and we do, we know. But there's there's technical limitations and a whole host of stuff usually tied in with these things. We try and be as accurate as we possibly can within the confines of what's viable, because we've got limitations in the amount of artwork we can produce. Like the later packs are quite difficult to kind of fit everything into the same sort of art pass. But a lot of the referencing sort of goes it sort of goes from photographic reference, museum reference, reenactor reference, and then we may look at other bits of media and things like that in between.
Since we're on the topic of cosmetics, Isonzo, known for its amazing facial hair. How do you choose which ones make the cut?
50-50 sort of. Is it a real thing? You know, the examples of like the Hullahy beards that the Austro-Hungarian Empire emperors of the time had, the mustaches of the Italian king and the famous generals. So do we have precedent from them historically? And we can draw from a whole range of historical figures here, from scientists to writers and things like that. The overarching thing, which is the other half of this for me, is, do they look cool? Because facial hair you can do so much with. You know, there's some, this is a wonderful front to explore it, because facial hair, obviously, you know, on the Western Front, you're much less likely to see full beards, or really grand, ornate sort of, you know, mountain men type beards. And that's due to a whole host of stuff, including like army regulation and the idea of having, you know, tight-fitting gas masks. Also, probably helping with the lice. But yeah, with this front in particular, we really had an opportunity to just go, okay, right. There are lots of historical references of particularly Alpini troops and anybody up in the mountains having not just, you know, these, you know, massive, great big whopping coats, but great big whopping beards as well. And yeah, for me, the deciding factor on in my opinion, but this is just mine, is whether or not it looks cool. There's some really cool stuff that we've included, and yeah, all based as much as possible on real people. I think my favourite would probably be the I think it's Eberholst, the massive like rugged beard that I think it was the oldest, or if not one of the oldest Austro-Hungarian soldiers has, and it's a really famous photograph. So we reproduced that beard as well. So yeah, two parts. First being, do they exist? Can we tie them to somebody historically? And yeah, for me, the most important bit, do they look cool? Are they cool? There's quite a few beards that have made for some real sort of technical difficulties as well. So we don't want beards clipping through balaclavas or, you know, or things like that. So it's not without its stresses. But yeah, I think my favourite in the re-release is probably going to be the Burnside one, famous American Civil War general. Yeah, obviously not our time frame per se, but it set a trend going back then, and you still see people with these great big sort of mutton chop sideburn things going on in the historical references.
Not to forget the Rennenkampf mustache. Before that's included with Avanti. Before we launched the game, we had a community vote on which is the coolest mustache, and then that one won, and that ultimately was one in the that went into the first pack. That's of course now you can get it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's a very big horizontal one.
And I think my favorite one to create, hands down. less so one that we could get a reference for, but the epic handlebar mustache that we did for the Movember DLC sort of charity pack thing. That was super cool. We had that for ages, and we were trying to find a way to kind of go and give it the justice that this glorious sort of piece of facial hair deserved. And I think that we really did that piece justice while helping out a good cause as well.
I think there was one reenactor which had that one, right?
Yeah,
I think that was Austro-Hungarian reenactor, which had that very twirly.
Very nice.
It's definitely the nicest mustache.
It's almost vaudevillian. Okay, so next we're going to move on to the community-led section of the Q&A. These are open to whoever wants to answer them, but first question here, do you ever feel limited by the Unity game engine?
Well, I suppose this is a relatively common question, as Unity, I think, can often be known for more casual games. But I guess I would like to sort of dispel this, because in reality, every engine kind of has its pluses, but also their like pain points, and all of the engines have their constraints. So I think it's all about what your team works best in. Like if they know it, it will be no problem. So finding ways to kind of utilize what's in front of you. Unity has made a lot of improvements during the years, but also our team has made improvements and in-engine tools and adjustments for us to kind of make almost whatever we want to or might need. So
from an art perspective, I would say definitely fully agree with that. And the programmers have compensated for any sort of limitation we would have. So we have amazing tools that help. So personally, I didn't really find Unity that limiting. And like Tia said, other engines, other softwares would have limitations on other things. So Unity has done a lot of improvements as well. So
yeah. I mean, I think I've been with the game series for over a decade now, so I've kind of seen every iteration of Unity we've previously used, and it can be, it maybe not as pretty out of the box as Unreal can be at points, but the leaps that it's made certainly in recent years has really helped lend serious improvements to not just our workflow but how the games look as well. So like the way that the game Isonzo looks compared to Tannenberg, the approach to lighting and what we were able to do, particularly around the environmental stuff as well, was super impressive. It can be a bit of a bothersome engine, but yeah, just to echo what everybody else has said, I think every engine comes with its own limitations, and we've got a really strong team who, if I need a tool, or if somebody needs a tool engine side that'll help our work progress, we can usually approach that, and it's a nice, calm, chill, sort of friendly way to approach it as well.
A very strong art direction can compensate for any out of the box disadvantage that the engine may have. Even so, to the extent that people often say to us when we first presented the game, it's like, oh, is this made in Unity? I didn't even realize that. So and props to Frank and the rest of our team who've really came in with a strong very strong art direction, and then you shape the engine around your vision. There's shaders and other VFX tool sets that all work together to create output that looks cohesive. Let's say that. I think that's important, and something looks cohesive. I think often you can throw stuff together, but it doesn't feel like there's a strong art direction. If you have a single vision and a very standardized way of approaching the art, then it will look the part as well.
Next, with any game, there are bound to be bugs. How do you prioritize fixes?
Well, Unfortunately, every game will always have bugs, but it really depends on a lot of factors. I think first things first, it's important to say that we keep track of probably every reported issue on all of our community platforms, and they get added to our internal tracking. So then, of course, we look at how severe the bug is. Does it break the match? How often does it happen? Does it potentially affect the balance of the game in some meaningful way? And then very severe bugs will, of course, get into production immediately or very soon. And smaller bugs sometimes have to wait for their turn, depending on how easy they are to resolve. Though, of course, sometimes the more problematic bugs don't get resolved as soon as possible or can take more time, as the risk of changing something in such a way can outweigh the severity of the bugs, potentially introducing instability to the game or something else. Or often the issues themselves can be dependent on outside factors that are not immediately solvable by us, where we can tie in those engine constraints there. But to add something positive, I guess, console players might appreciate this update in terms of bugs.
And this is a random question for all of you, but do you have a favorite bug?
Ooh, I will have to think about this. I think my favorite bug is the one where you would get on a mortar, and then when you fire a shell, you also fly away with it.
I think my favourite is a production side bug, but when we update the characters, sometimes the faces just disappear. But you do still have the eyes and the rest of the uniform, and yeah, it can be a bit jarring, but equally hilarious.
Yeah, we have many internal pictures and memes based off of those.
I remember one where the heads ballooned up.
Bobblehead bug, yeah.
A giant, like 50 by 50 meter head floating in the level. I think there's some. There must be some images floating around of that. I think it was in Verdun times, but
yeah, of course, one of the ones that I think can still be found in the game, unfortunately, is the one where like weapons balloon up. So like you're walking and you just suddenly see a huge handgun in front of you.
Another community question for you. Why are some uniforms and weaponry not exactly like they were historically?
On the weapons front, so we're limited a little bit by the fact that we kind of have to gamify some of this sort of stuff. So I'm thinking, specifically things like iron sights, for example. We change, particularly with the rifles that have very small sights, we tend to make those a little bit bigger just to make it easier to play with. We're aware of, these not necessarily being, the correct size, scale, etc. But we just, it's more user friendly to be introduced like that. I think also we have the iron sights set up incorrectly for the Kakano. The sight post should be a lot lower down, but this was really counterintuitive. I did a quick test with it a few years ago, and yeah, it can be a little bit frustrating in that sense. I know we've also got a few historical inaccuracies on some of the weapons as well. I think it comes down to the fact that a lot of them can be quite rare. So it's not always fully understood how a weapon might function, but similarly, we are also, kind of dependent on information on the internet as well. And if something's listed as, First World War, Madison machine gun or something, it can be a bit difficult to find exactly what we're looking at there, because that thing had a whole host of different magazines, barrels, and it quickly becomes a minefield in that sense. With regards to the uniforms, and I know that we've certainly got some issues with regards to like regimental numbers and things like that. That's it's an art limitation more than anything else. There are ways to explore, maybe like using decals or something like that, giving correct division numbers, but it's just a sort of production versus payoff type thing. So yeah, that generally isn't approached on that front. Don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Jos.
No, yeah, it's always a trade-off. How far do you go? I see some questions surrounding colors of uniforms. Different again, it's the different dyes that were around. What do you base yourself on? Certain sources, and there's the in-game coloring, the color grading that changes just a bit. The original color of the the base thing. So I mean, there's those kind of issues as well that sometimes pop up.
Yeah, and I think that ties in with the gamifying of it as well, effectively. So, particularly with the color grading that we have, it emphasizes color, and particularly with this front, trying to get a difference between the two uniforms early war is really useful. Knowing that you're shooting at an enemy is quite important. We've certainly found with some of the late war uniforms, where everybody's just basically wearing the same sort of color of beige or brown or grey, etc. It can be really difficult to really understand who's an enemy and who isn't. With the early war stuff, same with Verdun to a degree as well. These let's say kindly impractical uniforms, blues, reds, all of this sort of stuff. It's something that we can differentiate the two factions with. So it's not just it's also this thought given to identifying an enemy, etc. too.
Okay.
Or you could just shoot everyone and get a small penalty.
Hope for the best.
Small penalty, but yeah, exactly.
I think we made an interesting and good representation of what the war on the Italian front was like, but to the extent that you can live in it. But we covered the most iconic and important battles that's from the start to the end. Almost to the end, of course. I think if you travel from the Swiss border to the Adriatic coast, and there's each region is represented, which creates a good diversity of locations, from Dolomites to high peaks in the snow, the arid Carso, the lush Montello, now the night map on the sort of barren, destructive trench environment. So I think if you play Isonzo and you play all the environments, you get a good sense of what the locations and the battles were like. We've covered almost to an extreme extent the uniforms and their the different shapes and forms, weaponry, almost to the bottom of the barrel in terms of what can be covered. I'm pretty happy with what we've been able to do in the past 2.5 years since we launched Isonzo.
To end the Q&A, let's do some rapid-fire questions here. So, for Isonzo as a whole, what is your favorite map?
Well, I have strong opinions on this. I think, definitely Piave, my beloved. I think the vibe of the map is just unparalleled. The melancholic lighting, the colors, the diversity of the sectors, from the vineyards to the bridge. So, like urban combat, open fields. It's just always the most fun. But also, in stark comparison to what I just said, I really like Carso as well.
Controversial.
Yeah.
I think for me it's probably Sabatino, largely because that sort of last section in Sabatino, you've got the whole descent down into the village to attack it, and I think that's it was one of the earlier maps that we started on when approaching the project, and just to see that develop as in the way that it did was really, really interesting. But I think more than that, it really helped to kind of differentiate it from the previous two titles, in that you had this really sort of up-down warfare in massive vistas, and yeah, I think Sabatino probably captured my imagination the most. I'm also a fiend for using sniper rifles, so it being a big grand area that I can just kind of look up to and start sniping people may help with that too.
Yeah, I agree on Piave. I really like that mood of that map, so I have to agree with Thea. And also, I have a soft spot for Grappa. I really like how diverse that within the map it is. So you start with that really nice forest and the water going through, and then you keep climbing up and up until you reach snow. And I feel like that transition was just beautiful. It's really nice to play.
It was the perfect setup for the sort of snow map content as well, which was cool.
Yeah, it was a nice introduction to snow, and then we got a full on snowy map.
I think my favorite would then be Marmolada. That's definitely one of the most scenic ones. The peaks and I really like Sabatino as well, and Grappa. It's the most vertical, and so many great choices. Corinthia with the city, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's such a vibrant, and the colors, and yeah, I know it's Marmolada is definitely really almost the peak for me.
Similarly, what's your favorite weapon?
The ice pick, of course.
Mountaineer with an ice pick, for sure.
As a strong proponent of the Mountaineer ever since Isonzo has come into existence. Yeah, I have to say the ice pick with the Mountaineer, of course. And usually most handguns, but the ice pick.
Yeah, I think for me the single shot Vandal rifle.
That one is fun.
It's something. Yeah, it's something from another age, and it really falls into that category of if I miss this, I'm dead. So I really focus with it and still miss.
I like that gun because the first time I used it, I was like, "What is happening?" When you go through the reload process, and I still to this day, if I use that, I'm like, "What is happening?" I still don't know.
Yeah, it's a sort of weird drum sort of lock type thing with like you also said earlier, this old flintlock sort of hammer design on the side. It's really, really interesting. So yeah, probably my favorite. But also from an arts point of view, it looks completely unique to pretty much, I mean, all of the other single shot rifles from the time as well. And it's got a real soft spot for me.
Again, so many great choices. I think the Vetterli, the rattle of the gun. I like the iron sights of it. It's kind of to get a good picture. For me, it's always the iron sights that dictate a lot of how a gun feels, even though the stats are somewhat different. But the sort of how clear of a picture, how good you can line up your sights is, I think, the most important thing. So yeah, the Vetterli. Well, there's several, but I think the smaller the carbine one also because the sound design I like it. So.
Oh yeah, ice pick for the win.
Ice pick. I somebody ran up to me in game and did that, and I just kind of sat there stunned. I was like,
It's just a different experience. It gives you a completely different.
Props to the knife as well.
I am surprised none of you said rock.
Okay, my rock. Yeah, definitely the rock. I changed my opinion.
You have unlimited ammo with the rock. I'm just going to throw that out there. All right, which class do you usually play?
Well, I think I gave myself sort of away. With the ice pick and the handguns, I probably tend to go most for Mountaineer and Assault. But if I just want to chill a bit, then I do the Rifleman.
Yeah, I think all I have to say is the word sniper, and I'm done.
Jim is famous internally.
Yeah, I think it's because we improved on the sniping on Verdun so much. It feels really, really good in Isonzo.
I'm a rushing player myself, so Mountaineer with the speed, the sprint increase, definitely always the first in the fight, and with the carbines and rushing forward, that's definitely my playstyle. But I'm also a grenade person. When things get really intense around the objectives, which you often do, there's kind of a dual game there. So it's either you're rushing forward to get to the enemy lines as possible, but when there's an attritional battle, switching to more grenade warfare. There's so many to choose from there as well. So.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite, but I would say probably Rifleman is the one I use the most. But sometimes if I feel a bit like, I don't know, if I want to more fun, then Mountaineer run across.
Yeah, I would say if I'm playing defense, though, I'm definitely an engineer. So
Engineer for me, also probably my favorite class in Isonzo. All right, let's talk cosmetic DLC. Do you have a favorite for that?
yeah, I have, I think, Glacial as number one on my list, and then probably something like Expedition.
Yeah, I think for me the sort of second winter pass that we did, the introduction of like these completely impractical, massive snow boots and wicker shoes and things like that. That was really, really fun to work on, but also from a visuals point of view, like like almost every character sort of loadout in that DLC is like your hero in a cutscene in a game. You just stand out, and I think it was really, really good fun.
Yeah, I have to agree. The winter ones were just so interesting and such a contrast with all the others that had been published so far. So it was just a really nice DLC. I have to say that I have a soft spot for Montello as well, just because I personally worked on it. But I really like it as a map. It was interesting to work that.
I think Shell Shocked as a DLC works really well as well.
Yeah.
This sort of, we spent a lot of time debating what kind of uniforms we should do for that. We've from the start wanted to do sort of wounded warriors, bandaged up, beat up soldiers. So with sort of raggedy, torn pants and things like that. So
the bloodied faces and things like that were really, I don't want to say fun to work on, but it was a bit different compared to the other sort of generic DLCs, which are, uniforms and clothing. With this one, it's like, okay, here's a bandage, and this is where he's been hit in the head. Apply.
Yeah, I would probably also have to add that, I mean, of course, the Caporetto update, adding a new faction and the cool new uniforms, and the map that is different to the other, like that was a good time.
Yeah, like also the German staff officer, this sort of massive, figure with a golden pickle halbesque type thing. It's just like, yeah, that was pretty cool.
Groupie.
Yeah. Caporetto in general, the whole vibe of that sort of fall theme. It's interesting that our expansions have certain themes, like the German one, which took place in the fall, very much leaves falling, rain, muddy scenario, still in the mountains, so it's a bit foggy. It's really moody. It's like I haven't seen this in a similar. It's really something unique, complete in contrast to, I think, all of the maps before that were midsummer, sunny, blue sky, super contrast, super bright colors, and this is then a complete opposite. Not Western Front style, because it still has a sort of unique theme, but the contrast between that was very stark. So if you want to sample, take Carso and then play Caporetto, and then you go to Marmolada, or even higher Adamello, then it's like you get completely different themes. So I think, again, reiterate what we talked about before, but all the maps are so different, and they have such a beautifully handcrafted elements in them. Our level design is really on a quite a high level in terms of the attention we spend to detailing and theming them, and I'm really proud of that, what we managed to do there.
Absolutely wonderful answers on all the topics. Thank you so much for hanging out and chatting Isonzo with us. Before we go, Jos, you had something you wanted to mention to the community.
we're very invested in our series and in representing one. And for Isonzo, has finished. The book is not closed just yet, so we have some things that we're working on in the background. So we'll have to fans will have to wait and see what that will entail exactly. That's all I can say.
Okay. All right, we'll keep an eye out for it. If you want to stay up to date on everything Isonzo, Jos, what is the easiest way to do that?
Our main hub is Discord. We have a very big Discord community. I think the link will be available below this video and wherever links can be found. Reddit, Steam Hub is where we post our major content updates and in-depth blog information about the DLC that we're bringing, as well as the map. If you want to read back, and we have our entire roadmap for the last 2.5 years, and even prior to that, we go quite in depth on the historical background of all the weapons. You put quite a lot of time in sort of creating exposition for people who are really interested in knowing what has been put into the game and learning more about it. I really encourage you to read back our Steam Hub news page or our Reddit for that.
So there you have it. Thanks for tuning in to this Q&A on Isonzo's new Moschin Expansion. It's free and it's live right now. Go check it out, as well as the updated Avanti Savoia cosmetics. Connect with Isonzo using the links in the video description. Thanks for watching.